For years, Hart to Hart wasn't simply a television series. It was an escape. In a time before reality TV thrived on conflict and confession, the show offered glamour, romance, danger, and above all, devotion. Jonathan and Jennifer Hart weren't a couple constantly fixing problems. They were a couple already whole. Each week, audiences watched them move through mysteries with elegance and humor, their love unwavering and playful. That steadiness became the fantasy. Viewers didn't just admire their lifestyle. They believed in their partnership. Stefanie Powers understood that deeply. The marriage wasn't meant to reflect ordinary life. It was meant to rise above it. There were no petty arguments, no domestic exhaustion, no battles over trivial things. Even the mundane was absent by design. It was a world where love was light, mutual respect was constant, and joy felt effortless. That vision, carefully protected, is what made Hart to Hart linger long after its final episode, creating a marriage without shadows. Stefanie Powers often described Hart to Hart as fantasy with intention. Inspired loosely by the witty dynamic of the thin man, the show rejected kitchen sink realism. The Harts didn't wrestle with resentment or routine. They floated above it. Powers believed that choice mattered. At a time when television increasingly mirrored life's messiness, Hart to Hart offered something aspirational instead. It wasn't denial, it was relief. She joked that there were no arguments over chores because there was no garbage. Max took care of that. But beneath the humour was a philosophy. The show trusted audiences to accept joy without explanation. Powers later reflected that modern television often confuses exposure with truth, revealing every flaw as if intimacy must come from discomfort. She disagreed. She preferred mystery, discretion, and imagination. Fans echoed that sentiment for decades, telling her they wished the show would return. What they missed wasn't nostalgia alone. It was the feeling that love could be playful, elegant, and uncomplicated, even if just for an hour each week. The night everything ended. The end of Hart to Hart came without ceremony. After 5 successful seasons, there was no farewell episode, no slow goodbye. Stefanie Powers was in France filming Mistral's Daughter when the plans were already forming for another season. 2 episodes were even slated to be filmed in Paris, complete with fashion shows, romantic misadventures, and a whimsical storyline involving Freeway falling in love with a French poodle. Then came the call. Aaron Spelling, Robert Wagner, and Tom Mankiewicz delivered the news personally. The show was cancelled. The finality of it was devastating. Powers later admitted she cried all night. The abruptness made it harder, not just losing a job, but losing a world that had become part of her identity. The Harts were still alive in her imagination, still evolving. There was more to tell. Instead, it ended in silence. That sudden loss stayed with her, not as bitterness, but as a reminder of how fragile even beloved creations can be. A reunion that became something. More years later, something unexpected softened the loss. Robert Wagner called Powers with a proposal, not for television, but for the stage. He suggested Love Letters, a simple 2-person play built entirely on correspondence and emotional restraint. Powers agreed to read it, and almost immediately it felt right. They tested it privately first, performing in Wagner's living room for family and close friends. The connection was undeniable. What followed was extraordinary. Together they performed the play more than 400 times, setting a record for a single acting pair. They toured across the United States, Canada, London, and beyond. But the most moving moments happened after the curtain fell. Fans approached them not as celebrities, but as symbols. Young women told Powers they refused to settle for less than a love like Jonathan and Jennifer's. Her response was honest and tender. It was a high bar, she admitted, but she hoped they would find it. That legacy mattered more than ratings ever had. Guarding the heart of the show behind the scenes, Hart to Hart thrived on consistency. A small group of directors returned frequently, helping preserve tone and rhythm. Writing, however, was more fluid. As new writers arrived each season, Powers and Wagner quietly became caretakers of their characters. They understood the Harts in a way no script alone could capture. The most important scenes, the intimate conversations between Jonathan and Jennifer, were often lightly scripted or improvised. These weren't about plot. They were about connection. Powers explained that no one could truly write those moments. Writers had to create the situation and trust the actors to find the truth. Over time, the characters lived inside them. This wasn't about control or ego. It was stewardship. Long-running shows change, as people come and go, but the actors remained. They knew when something felt false. Protecting the marriage at the center of the story became their responsibility, and they carried it quietly, scene by scene, ensuring the heart never lost its voice. Love, loss, and a life redirected away from the screen. Stefanie Powers' life unfolded with its own depth and complexity. Her first marriage ended quietly, but soon after she experienced a love that would change her forever. Her relationship with William Holden. It was private, intense, and deeply meaningful. His sudden death in 1981 devastated her. Yet from that grief emerged purpose. Within a year, she became the founding president of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, dedicating herself to conservation efforts in Kenya. What began as shared passion became her life's mission. She traveled extensively, worked with major zoos, and became a fierce advocate for wildlife preservation. Love returned later in different forms. A marriage to French aristocrat Patrick Huit de la Chesnay, and later a long, steady relationship with Tom Carroll. Each chapter brought joy and loss. Through it all, Powers lived with conviction, whether campaigning for Robert F. Kennedy or breaking barriers in elite British polo. Her life was never static. It evolved, adapted, and endured. Endurance in the quietest storm. In late 2008, Stefanie Powers faced one of her greatest personal trials. Diagnosed with a rare form of lung cancer, she confronted her mortality with calm resolve. In January 2009, she underwent major surgery, losing part of her right lung. Recovery was grueling, but fate delivered another blow almost immediately. That same month, her mother died at 96. Physical pain and grief collided, leaving little space to breathe, literally and emotionally. It was a season defined not by glamour, but by resilience. Powers later reflected on that period not with drama, but with clarity. Survival wasn't heroic, it was necessary. She moved forward quietly, choosing strength without spectacle. That chapter reshaped her understanding of endurance. Fame offered no protection. What carried her through was perspective. The same steadiness she had always brought to her work. Life, she learned again, does not soften its timing. It simply asks whether you are willing to keep going. The long road. Before the breakthrough. Before Hart to Hart, success came in fragments. Powers worked constantly throughout the 1960s and 1970s, appearing in popular series like The Rockford Files, Kung Fu, The Mod Squad, and The $6 Million Man. She starred in The Feather and Father Gang, a promising show that vanished within months. Even under contract at Universal Studios, her career felt nomadic, visible but unsettled. She found deeper material in political miniseries and television films that demanded emotional risk, but longevity remained elusive. On stage, she took bold chances, including productions aimed for Broadway that collapsed before opening. Opportunity was always close, but never secure. That history made Hart to Hart different. It wasn't just success. It was permanence. It gave her a home, a character that endured. And yet, she never stopped moving. Theatre, film, music, international tours. Powers continued to choose growth over comfort, refusing to live inside nostalgia alone. A legacy that still breathes. Looking back, Stefanie Powers' career reads less like a straight ascent, and more like a winding journey shaped by persistence and purpose. Hart to Hart may have ended abruptly, but its spirit never faded. The show left behind more than episodes. It left permission to believe in joy without cynicism. For Powers, that was its greatest achievement. If the series influenced people to expect kindness, devotion, and respect in their own lives, she considered that a privilege. Decades later, the legacy still resonates not because it was perfect, but because it was sincere. In a world increasingly eager to expose flaws, Hart to Hart dared to celebrate harmony. And Stefanie Powers, through every reinvention and loss, carried that same grace forward. Not as fantasy, but as choice.